There we go. Okay, so yesterday we learned a brisa that brought a plan A and a plan B of how we know that when one pays for a chavala, they pay with cash and it's not literally ayin hachasayin. And the two rayas were from the Gzer Shava of Makin Nefesh Behema, which we know you pay, it says Yishalmena, and the Ish Kiyitin Mumba Misai, we learn Maka Maka. Just like when you're Maka Behema, you pay in cash. So too, when you're Maka Odom, you're in cash. The Gemara said we need a second backup of Lasikhu Kaifer Lenefesh Ritzeach, Dafka Ritzeach, who actually murders. You don't accept Kaifer for, but for someone who only damages the aver of a person, that does not pay. That does take Kaifer. That does pay. How do you know that you could only pay and you don't have a choice? You don't have an option of actually doing an ayin tachasayin or yad tachas. For that, we use the Gzer Shova of Makimak. And that's the maskana of the Gemara, how we know that when someone does a chavala, he only pays in money. And now we have a series of different propositions of how we could learn this halacha from. That when someone does a chavala, he only pays a moment. And the Gemara is going to have many suggestions, and only one of them is going to be successful towards the bottom of Pedal and Maralef. So yesterday we learned the first one. The first one that we learned is that how can you suggest that ayin tachasayin means ayin mamish? What if the perpetrator's eye is bigger than the victim's eye? It wouldn't be equal. So it must be that it means a moment. Zok Gemara, that's not a kasha. The Gemara deflected it by saying it's not the size of the eye, it's vision. You took away someone's vision, so therefore they take away your vision. And the Gemara brought a raya, you say such a svara, because if that's the case, if you have to look at the size of what was damaged, how can you ever kill somebody for murder? What if the murderer is bigger or smaller than the victim? Elamai, it doesn't matter. You look at a life. He took someone else's life, so we'll take his life. So therefore, that's how you would be able to learn the pasuk. Thank you so much. So from the pasuk B'nei Ubei, we don't see that ayin tachasayin means moment. So that was the first attempt at an alternate raya, which failed. So now we're going to try another one. Tanya Yidach, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochi Omer. So we're at the two dots by the first wide line on that Pedal and Aleph. Tanya Yidach, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochi Omer. Ayin tachasayin. Momoin, it means momoin. Ata Omer momoin oy enel ela ayin mari. Maybe it means you actually knock out the perpetrator's eye. Zog to Gemara, what about Tarecha Yasuma Visima? What if the perpetrator was blind and he blinded someone else's eye? Or Kita, he didn't have a hand. The Kita, and he cut off someone else's hand. Or Chiger, he was limping, he had an issue with his foot, the Chiger, and he did that same to somebody else. How could you blind him if he's blind already? Amra, Mishpat Echad Yilachem. Mishpat Hashava Lakolchem. So therefore, you're not going to be able to blind somebody who's already blind. So therefore, how are you going to punish him in the same fashion that you would have to punish anyone who perpetrates such a damage on somebody else? So Elamai must mean that you pay in cash. Zok Gemara, no, my kusha. That doesn't prove that you're paying cash. Dilma, maybe the rule is, Heicha de Efsher, if someone has vision and he takes away someone else's vision, Efsher, that's where you could do it. But Heicha lo Efsher, if it's a person who doesn't have vision, who perpetrated the crime, lo Efsher, you can't. Upatrina lo will be potter. In other words, the Torah says, if you could do an ayin tachasayin, you will do it. If you can't, you can't. That's correct. Oh, so you would think he's part of the Gamrit. Duvi brought it up. So on the third line from the top, Rashi is Upatrin le beloy klum. Vavim mishpat shava. Oy litel ever mamish. Oy liftel Gamrit. In other words, if you can give him the oynish that everybody will get for such a crime, you give it to him. If not, you don't offer an alternate punishment such as paying. The Eloite Mahachi, and if you don't agree that such a suggestion would be possible, well, then let's look at Misa. Treifa shahargas hashom. What if somebody is a treifa and he killed a complete healthy person? My avdinale. What are you going to do for him? So you might ask him, what do you mean, kill him? He's a treifa, he's about to die, but kill him. Why isn't that an option? We're going to see in a second why that's not an option. Ella, what are you forced to say? That when it comes to Ritzicha, if you can carry out upon him the chiyuv of Mises Best, you will. And what happens? He's partnering Gantan. So you can learn the pasuk that way as well, so you don't have a raya from the pasuk Minei Ubei that it must mean moment. Now let's take a step back. Why is a treifa shaharak potter? Why didn't you kill him? Zokt Rashi at hafel de kazach. Because if you try to kill a treifa, right? If someone kills a treifa, is he chayiv misa? He's not. If you kill a treifa, you are not chayiv misa because gavra katila kotel, he was already dead. So oibazo, you can never have edim that could say edus on the treifa that he killed, because if two edim come along and say Reuven killed Shimon, the edim are not believed. You know why the edim are not believed? Because what if these edim were musam and two other edim came and said, "How could you have seen Reuven killed? You were with us elsewhere." Would you kill these edim? No, because these edim were only going to kill. Their intention was to kill a treifa. So memela, these edim are edim she'iyat yochel azima. Edim she'iyat yochel azima are apostle edim. So if they're apostle edim, kum dechayis, you could never kill somebody who's a treifa.
The best hitman is a guy with terminal cancer.
No.
If he's able to get it done on time. But if to answer your question is yes, it happens, but you won't kill somebody who kills a treifa because once in a million and this happens. It happens. The fact is he killed the Gavra. So Frekter Bekiveger a poshet tekasha off the charts. Again, Rashi says, why is it that you don't kill a treifa who killed? Because you don't believe the Edom, the apostle Edom. Dr. Bekiveger, if you don't believe the Edom, then it never happened. In other words, you can't tell me you don't kill a treifa that killed because you could never have proof that a treifa killed. So how could you ever verify that a treifa killed? That's what Bekiveger's kasha. Let's leave inside. I love the Gillian and Shasas. So at the side, so Rashi says, Edom that say a treifa killed are Edom shet yachal azima. Kasha lifrek Bekiveger. Even to who Edus she'iyat yachal azima. So then they're possible. So they mikra Edus. If they're not Edus, then you don't even know that the treifa ever killed. In fact, if you don't have kosher Edom that he killed, so then maybe he didn't kill. What's the Gemara asking? Of course you'll have mishpat echad. There'll never be a case where someone who kills will be chayiv. Because you're going to suggest a treifa won't be chayiv? How do we ever know that a treifa killed?
What if he admits it? What if he brags that he killed somebody?
I don't know if you kill. You don't kill him off himself. You only kill him if Edom come. If someone comes to bed and says, "I killed somebody," I'm sorry. The Mesa Masarasha. Does he have to have Edom in Hasra? I don't think he gets killed for saying that. I don't know if it's Moed B'Knas Potter, but if Edom came later, he'd be chayiv. But the problem is, the pretending like the lek Edis, dark of Tzorachin. So Kiveger doesn't understand. How could the Gemara say that you have an example of someone who is a murderer who's potter? We have no verification that he's a murderer. So fact David, maybe it's speaking where he was Maida, so you know he was a murderer. Okay, but I thought Rav Kiker's chap was a good chap. By definition, when you're saying the Edom can't be believed, so by definition you're saying we don't have verification that he did the Ritzicha. Gewaltig. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. We're going to try another one for size. So we had 3 suggestions so far, of which neither one worked out. So we still have to come on to our like the first price said. The very Shmuel Tana Amar Mehacha. I'm sorry. Amar the pasuk says it says Kain Yinasein boy. It says Kasher Yitain Mum Ba'adam Kain Yinasein boy. Let's look it up. Let's see the pasuk here inside. The ish Yitain Mum Ba'misai Kain Ye Asalai. It says Kain Ye Asalai. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the pasuk before, for the pasuk after Tchav Tav Chav. Shever Tachas Shever Ayin Tachasein Shein Tachas Ayin Tachasayin Shein Tachashein Kasher Yitain Mum Ba'adam Kain Yinasen Boy. So what does this mean exactly? What is the lashon Nesina? The Ein Nesina Elamam. Nesina always refers to moment. So Zok Gemara, if that's the case, you have to look at the whole sentence. Kasher yitin mum ba'adam kenyi nasan boy. If you're going to touch kenyi nasan boy means you don't actually give him a mum. You pay him. Well, then kasher yitin mum ba'adam doesn't mean you actually gave him a mum. It means you paid him. I don't know exactly what you did, but you definitely didn't physically give him a mum. So, Frank the Gemara, if you're going to say when he perpetrated the crime, hachanami demamanu, when he stole money from him, the worth his eye. If you're going to say whenever you use the lashon nesina, it was only a financial type of situation. So, what's the whole case over here? So, of course, kasher yitin mum must mean you actually hit him. So you see, the word nesina doesn't necessarily mean mammon. Zakt Gemara, Amri Dever B'Shmuel, Kra Yiseir Darshi. It's not darshaning from the fact that it says the word nasan that automatically nasan by default means mammon. Rather, there's the extra words here. Michti. Iksiv ve'ish ki yiten mum ba'misoi. It says ve'ish ki yiten mum ba'misoi in the Friedika Parsha, in the Friedika Pasuk. Ve'ish ki yiten mum ba'misoi, kasher asa kenye asal. That's what it says in the next pasuk. Kenye nasan by lamali. So why in the next pasuk did it use the word kenye nasan by? You see, the normal terminology when you're talking about punishing the perpetrator is a lashon of kenye yasal. I do the same to him. Why did the pasuk deviate from the simplest way of expressing the punishment, if in fact the punishment is actually that you do it to him, and it changed the nusach to kenye nasan by? Shemami no mamon. Since the Torah deviated from the standard nusach of kenye yasal by, and the Torah used the lashon of kenye nasan by, it means the Torah is telling us, I mean mamon. Shemami no mamon. Zokt Gemara, kasher yitein mum ba'adam lamali. So if that's the case, so then why does it say kasher yitein mum? It could have said kasher yasem mum ba'adam. If you're saying that's the normal way to express it. Zokt Gemara, adi de boy michtav kenyi nasan boy. Since the Torah had to deviate when it talks about the punishment, and it had to say kenyi nasan boy to tell us that it means mamon. So to keep it parallel, cause of nami kasher yitein mum ba'adam. Okay, so here you see this worked. This pasuk seems to have worked, right? You have a limit that it means mammon.
I want to point out, this seems to be just an intellectual exercise, finding some, before Chazal had this debate, there must have been thousands of murders, right? So how did they deal with it?
Chavolos. Yeah, so they must have known what halach is. They were just probing as to where you see that in the Torah.
That's right.
That's right. No, that's a good point. We have many halachas that we do by rote, and if you ask somebody why do we do that, many people wouldn't be able to answer. So now the Gemara is probing what's the reason.
This is was matkatin in the Heim.
That's right. This is the Gres Raya.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. The Ve'er Abchiyatana. Is that like when they were in the midbar? To say this hot like in the Heim, like they meant in the Mitzrayim? I wonder what the Heim was in those days. What?
Starting from Sinai.
Yeah. The Ve'er Abchiyatana. The Ve'er Abchiyatana has another option of how we know. That when you pay for a chavola, you're not actually suffering the same fate. Omakra yad biyad. So let's look at the pasuk inside. It says, and if I'm not mistaken, this pasuk is actually by Edom Zayman. You have to do to them what they intended to do to their victim. And then the pasuk says, "V'loisachar nefesh b'nefesh, ayin b'ayin, shein b'shein, yod b'yod, regel b'rod." So when it says yad b'yad, that means that something is handed from one hand to another hand. What is that? Davar nit miyad liyad. What gets handed from one person to another? Mamahin. So from the yad b'yad, you learn that these things are mam. In fact, the Gemara elamayata regel b'regel nami hachihu. So oibazoi. What do we learn from regel b'regel? It's actually not a limit of yad b'yad that by definition yad b'yad means mammon. It's because there's an extra puzzle. Mirti. The Torah already says that there's a chiyuv to do to the Eitz Zayimim what he had intended to do to his victim. So why does the pasuk go by to Isol Kadaitach Mamish If asisam loy kasher zoma means literally you do to the Adam exactly what they intended to do. They wanted someone's hand to be cut off. You cut off their hand. So then why does the pasuk have to now go into detail of loisachis inecha nefesh b'nefesh ayin ba'ayin shein b'shein yod b'yod lamali shema mina mama? It must be to tell you you don't literally do kasher zomam, rather you do it with mum. So therefore you might ask regel b'regel lamali. What do we learn out of regel b'regel? Zok Gemara, you don't need a limit for that. I need to chsiv yad b'yad, chsiv nami regel b'regel. Regel b'regel could just be continuing on in the sentence of yad v'yad. I believe from nefesh and ayin b'ayin there are separate lemudim for. So once again, we have a raya from Eid Zoymim that it means a moment. So we had another successful one. So we actually had more than one successful rayas. Abaya Amar Asya, we learn it miditanid v'chizkiya from a brayso that Chizkiya taught us. The tanid v'chizkiya ayin tachas ayin, nefesh tachas nefesh. This pasuk is talking about the case where two people were fighting and by mistake they punched a pregnant lady. So the pasuk says that he will have to, the perpetrator, as long as there's no mishpat maves and there's no komle b'derabi minei, then it's ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, yod tachas yod, and regel tachas rab. So it says, but before that pasuk, it said, if you wanted to kill this woman and that was your intent and you killed her, then you actually kill. If not, then ayin tachazayin, shein tachashen, yod tachazayod, regel tachazrod. So we learn from here, ayin tachazayin, nefesh tachas nefesh, v'loy nefesh v'ayin tachazayin. You will never do two punishments, sai nefesh and sai ayin. We will not take away sai somebody's nefesh and sai somebody's ayin if he only took away somebody's ayin. Zok to Gemara, if we're talking about a cash payment, you pay for the ayin. You don't pay for a nefesh. But v'salkadaydach mamish, if you're going to tell me that you literally have to knock out this person's eye, how could you avoid that? Zimnin the mishkachas la ayin v'nefesh tachas ayin. Sometimes, while punishing somebody and taking away his eyesight, you're also going to end up taking away his life. The bahade the avrele nafkala l'shmase. Maybe this person couldn't handle the procedure of blinding him, and that caused him to die. And that the Torah says you cannot do. So therefore, it must be that it's a moment. That's not a raya. Umay kusha. Dilma meimed amdinale. Before they blind him, they first assess that his body can handle that trauma and he won't die from it. If they assess that he could be makabel that punishment, then only then is it done. And if they see that this person won't be able to withstand that, you don't do. What if they make an assessment that he could be makabel it, and it turns out that he didn't survive? So you're going to tell me it's a problem now that it's nefesh ve'ayin tachasayin? That's not a problem. If he dies, he dies. You find the same thing by Malchus. If they assessed him that he can handle 27 Malchus, and then he ended up dying because he actually couldn't handle that. So that's not a kasha of nefesh ve'ayin tachasayin, because that's a mistake. Mistakes happen. But the norm would be that you could do it. So this raya was deflected from here. You don't have a raya that means tomorrow. Rab Zvid Mishmei de Rabba Omar. Amar Kro, you have a pasuk that says, Hetza Tachas Potza, a wound instead of a wound, Litain Tsar V'Mokoim Nezek. You pay Tsar V'Mokoim Nezek, meaning if you damage somebody and you have to pay his damage, you have to pay what he's worth less in the shuk because he no longer has an arm, he no longer has an eye. You also have to pay the payment for the Tsar that he had. If you're actually knocking his hand off, like he knocked Yenim's hand off, doesn't that automatically include the pain? Avada, it does. The same way his victim had tsar when his hand was cut off. So why would there be a separate payment of tsar when you take if taking off his hand means literal? He's going to experience that tsar. It's not a rayu, my kusha. Dilma ika inish the mefanik is leitzayr tvei. The inish the loy mefanik less leitzayr. People experience, as our prime minister once said, people experience the same things differently. What you felt in the experience of our exchange, I didn't feel that way. When you feel that I molested you and I abused you, I felt I was just being friendly, right? Dr. Rashi, v'ika inish the loy mefanik, mipetza tachas potza, lemesiv leheich the beni ubeni. So maybe what it means is, since some people have more tsar, some have less tsar, even if you cut off this guy's hand, but he might not experience the same tsar as a victim. Yes, he would have to pay the difference in the tsar. However, you would assess its monetary value. The Gemara is going to get into that later. But therefore, it's not a kasha. It could still mean that it's literal. Why does it say Petzatachas Patza, Litin Tsar, even though you're already playing Nezek? Because even though you'll chop off his hand, just like he chopped off his friend's hand, he still would not be experiencing the same pain.
How could people experience same? Assess the difference.
Let's see how we assess it. Let's get to that Gemara.
The difference in pain.
Zok Gemara, Papa Mishmei de Rava Amar Kra. The pasuk says, "V'rapoi yirapei," and heal he shall heal. Lite yirafu b'makom nezek. Even though you're paying for why someone's worth less because he no longer is the hand, but you also have to pay doctors to heal the wound. If you're literally taking his hand off, the same time, just like his victim needed medical bills, he will also require a doctor. So once again, it can't mean literally; it has to mean mum. There are people who get healed very quickly, and there are those who don't heal as fast. So not necessarily will the medical bills and that experience be the same. Rashi says the word high means maher. Asher high. High means high five means quick five. Lamai nafkamina. Once again, the reason why it says v'rape is if one's medical bills would be less than the medical bills that he caused another one to suffer, he'll have to pay the difference. Ravashi Omar, so this raya was rejected. Ravashi Omar, Asya tachas mishor. Tzivacha ayin tachas ayin. Uksosom shalim mishalim shor tachas hashor. Malalon moment. Just like by shor tachas shor, men mamoin, afkan mamoin by ayin tachas ayin. Frank Gemara, the same question we asked on the Brisa. My chosas the yalvas tachas mishor. What's up if you learn tachas by ayin tachas ayin? From Adam Amazik. From Adam to Mazik Adam. We learned it from Shor. Maybe Nelev tachas may Adam. Tachas nefesh, and that means you're literally killing him. So Mehechadesi to learn from Behema that you only pay Mamoin, maybe learn from Adam where you actually get killed. Malalon mamish afkan mamish. Ami the Gemara says no, it's mistaber done in nizakin not for murder. They ain't done in nizakin minisa. Zok Gemara adarabah. Maybe done in Adam they ain't done in Adam mi Behema. And it was for this kasha that the Gemara said that's why the Bryson needed the second pasuk of Lenefesh Rotzeach. But here we don't have that. El Amar Abashi, you know where we're learning from tachas? From a case of tachas by Adam. The tachas asher ina, which is the pasuk referring to somebody who's ma'ana, a girl, he has to pay her damages, he has to pay her pain. So there, you talk it's Adam, and it's Nezikin from Nezikin. And there, it's a payment of cash. So that's the raya that ayin tachas ayin is cash. Tachas ashina yolav, because that has both features: adam me adam and nezakin me nezikin. Tanya Belezer Aimer ayin tachas ayin again ayin mamish. Rabbi Lezer argues up until now we were saying that ayin tachas ayin means cash. Rabbi Lezer is a dissenting opinion. No, it literally means when you knock out someone's eye, they knock out your eye. Freit Gemara mamish sol kadaitach. It's impossible that Rabbi Eliezer actually means you actually knock out somebody's eye. That's Sharia. Rabbi Eliezer, less lay. T'chol hani tanoi. Are you telling me Rabbi Eliezer argues on everybody who says avad it only means mammon? Azoiv mit gefirten daheim? Omarabo, no. Loimar, to teach us, she'ein shom noisa ke'ebed. when you assess the value of the eye, up until now, everybody learned, you look at the nizik and you see what he sold in the shuk for with his eye, what he sold in the shuk for without his eye. That's not how Rabbi Eliezer learns it. Amalei Abaye. So the Gemara says, so I got ahead of myself. So first Rabbi says, we don't shot him up like an Eved when we assess his damage. Amalei Abaye, Ela Kaman, Kiben Chayrin. You're going to assess him how his value drops due to this injury as a Ben Chayrin. Ben Chayrin mi istidami. How do you assess the value of a Ben Chayrin? Never is a Ben Chayrin being sold. It's always an Eved being sold. That's the only way to make that assessment. You don't look at the nizik, what his value is with his eye, and what his value is without his eye. You look at the mazik. You're going to ask me, what do you mean, the mazik? The mazik isn't the damage. How does that pay for damage? Zok Rashi, Ela b'mazik einoi shel mazik shaminan kama hu shavar limukar achshav v'kama hu yafa b'lo yayin. V'hainu mamish. When he says ayin mamish, it's ki'ilu like you're knocking his eye out because he's paying for the value of his eye, not the value of the eye that he damaged. The kamer einoi shel mazik nishuma, the eye of the mazik is assessed tachas einoi shel nizik. But the Maisa, what's the logic? How is that paying damages? So Tosfos, a small little Tosfos, opens up our eyes, and Tosfos, the second Tosfos on the Amid is Elba the Mazik. The same way, if your animal is a sharmut kills somebody, you pay koifer, and there's a shita who holds koifer as a kapara for your aveira, so you pay your value, not the value of the nizik. The mishal b'tamei mazik, the rachmana kara koifer, aval atalakech koifer. So you see that the Torah refers to sometimes the tashlumin of Chavola, the Torah refers to it as koifer. Because it says, koifer l'nefesh roitzeach. When you l'nefesh roitzeach, you don't take koifer. But for Chavola, you would take koifer. So you see it's called koifer. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer learns it has the properties of koifer, where you're not paying the demei ayin of the nizik, rather you're paying the demei ayin of the mazik, because it's like pinyon nefesh. It's like you're being mechaper on yourself. So that is the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. So he's a lone shita who holds that they assess the damages on the mask. There was a donkey, the kata yoda the tanuka, that cut off the hand of a child, the eunuch of a child. Also, they came to Papa Bashmul to see how much he's going to pay. Amalu zilu shumule arba devarim. He's got to pay 4 devarim. Amar le Rabba, what do you mean 4? Vanan chamishitna. It's nezik taribu yishavas and bushes. Amar le Papa said no levarmi nezik kamina. Avadi pays nezik. You also have to pay taribu yishavas and bushes. Amar le Abaya, what are you talking about? Abaya challenged Rav Papa. V'ha chamarhu. This is not an adam hamazik. This is a chamar hamazik. V'chamar ain't a mishalmal nezik. The holding of dalad dvarim is only if a person does a chavala. Here the chavala was done by an animal. Amalu, you're right. You're right. I didn't get clarity in the case. I passed in too soon. You're right. Zilu shumulei nizak. Yeah, he only pays nezik. Sorry, but could be, but it's still a chamar. But you have to assess him like an evet. Amalu said, okay, so do just that. Zilu shamiu ka'avda. Amalu avua the yunuka. Amalei amalahu avua the yunuka leibeina. The zila be'milsa. You actually have to take this victim Rachman al-Islam, take him to the slave market and see what people bid for him, and then figure out what people would have bid for him had he had a hand. Or maybe don't show that he doesn't have a hand, see what people bid, then show he doesn't have a hand, and take new bids. To do that to a child, to humiliate your child, to put him in the slave market, the father refuses. Zok to Gemara, Amrulay, they told him, you as a father don't have a right to mess up your son and prevent him from getting his full payment. The father said, let's figure out how much it's worth. When he becomes an adult, I'll already pay him. I don't want my child going through that humiliation. No, we're coming to Purim that the Satmar Rebbe used to be makbid that all of the Bochum in Yeshiva had to go schnorren. There was one Boch who came from a wealthy family, and the father says, "Ich will nicht as man zien, let him get schnorren. Whatever he's going to raise, we'll make $100. Ich is the So the Rebbe said, "You don't understand. You think I need this $100? I want to teach a Yid that you have to go and lower yourself to ask to help for a tzvaita. So he said, I want every boy to go collect it."
Friday, walks up in sheets.
And Baruch Hashem, it's gelungen, wherever you are, wherever you go, there's always people from somewhere raising money for tzedakah. Now the question is, does a little child experience boishas? He doesn't even know what's going on. So why would there be a payment for boishas for a little child? So zokt toisvis zilu shum ledal varm hayasaver the adam hezekai. Obviously, Rav Papa mistakenly thought that this damage was made by a person. Va'oisa katan kol kach gadol haya the michlel leu michlam. The child was old enough to appreciate the humiliation. So in fact, there would be a payment of boishas. Yeah, I hear. Zokt mahutur the alam yode the alas yode dinuch. An ox chewed off the hand of a child. Also, they came to Rabba. Amalu Rabba said, Zilu Shaimu Kavda assess him like a nebbit to determine the damage. Amr Leib Amar Hudamar Rabba, you yourself taught us. Kolonishum Ke'evet. Anytime you have to assess the value of something by taking him to the slave market and getting that assessment done, ain't going Bava. Such a payment you'll never enforce in the city of Bava. And we're here in the city of Babel, and you yourself are saying that we should go enforce such a payment. How is that possible? It's all about the tafas. Meaning, yes, Bezdin will not extract the payment from the mazik. But what if the nizik grabbed something of value that belonged to the mazik? He could keep it. So we need to know what the value of it is, because if he grabs something that's worth way more, that's something that he wouldn't be able to keep. So we want to know how much it's worth, so we know what he can grab. In this case, shar b'shar, if a shar was damaged by a shar, in this case, shar ba'adam, or if a shar was damaged by an adam, so meaning only property got damaged, that that you would collect in Bava. But in this case, adam ba'adam, but if it's a human got damaged, whether it was damaged by a person, or in this case, adam b'shar, or whether the adam was damaged by the shar, that is something you wouldn't collect in Bava. We have no idea the reasoning yet. And now the Gemara is going to reveal that. Why is it that you don't collect when a person got damaged? Doesn't matter if he was damaged by a person or if he was damaged by a shar, he cannot collect damages because you need a proper bezdin with smicha musmachim to make that determination. In this case, shar ba'adam, when we're talking about an animal that gets damaged, guess what? It has the same restriction. Nami Elohim ba'inon beleka. Where do we see that you need a bez, you need like him? It's in Parshas Mishpatim. If you look in Parshas Mishpatim, the Torah goes through a whole series of psukim talking about an ox getting damaged, talking about a person getting damaged, talking about tiktoinos, and all the way at the end of all the psukim, the Torah says, Ad ha Elohim yovid varshnei. Rashi the Kasavra Kulakot. The Gemara feels that Ad Elohim yovid varshnei is going back on all of those previous discussions that it all has to be assessed by a proper bezin, and you don't have it. But frankly, Gemara, that's not a reason to make a distinction between a human who got hurt versus an animal that got hurt, because the same Ad Elohim is referring to both of them. Ella, once again, Ma'ishna shar b'shar ba'adam dishlichusayu kavdinon. There we say shluchusai kavdinon. There was a svara that we actually had in the Gemara before. How could we be goiva things nowadays that you require a proper bezin of musmachim to do? The teretz is, we say that the bezin of musmachim appointed every rav in every generation as a shliach to carry out what really is going to be pinned on the bezin that is musmachim. So if you can use that gimmick, not sure if it's appropriate to call it a gimmick, but that loophole to say that, yes, you know why you could collect if a shar got damaged? Because there we say, shluchusayu kavdinon, midid ava ahaydos v'halvois. Any time where people lend money and they're borrowing money and they have such choshe mishpatik shailos, we don't have dayanim mumchim that are musmach from Mimosh Moshe. We don't have it. Elamai, there's this svar of shluchusayu kavdinon. We're not bezin, but we're just doing the shlichus of a proper bezin. But if that's the case, apply that same loophole, that same mechanism to if a person got damaged. So we don't have a reason to make a distinction between if a shar gets damaged versus if a person gets damaged. So what is the reason? Amri Zok to Gemara, I'll tell you what the difference is. Kika Avdini Shlichusayu, you know when we say Shlichusayu Kavdinon, we just link it back to an earlier bezin that's asking us to carry this out, is Bemidi the Kimlon Vigave. Something that we know with clarity what its value is. But Bemidi the Kimlon Vigave, but if we don't know its value, we have to take it to the slave market and make the assessments. There, Lo Yavdin Shlichusai. If it's a clear what the payment is, there you could just pin it on the previous bezin. But if they have to actually make the sensitive assessment, there you cannot say shluchus. Frankly, more that's not a reason to make a distinction, because by a shor you also have to make assessments. Amri shor b'shor b'shor ba'adam. When a shor gets damaged, whether by a shor or by an adam, nami lakim lam b'gavei. There's also an assessment that has to be made as to its value. So we're stuck. Why is Rava making a distinction between an animal getting damaged versus a person getting damaged? Elapoy chazi, go look. Heichem is davne tura b'shuka. That's not called making an assessment. You could just go see how much a shor is sold for in the shuk. It's an easy assessment. That you could say shluchusayu. Frankly, more adam ba'adam b'shor nami hoy chazi heichem is davne avde b'shuka. You could still make that same assessment. So again, you're not showing us a distinction. V'oid, and I'll ask you another question. Tashlum kefel, the tashlum arba v'chamisha, the kitzi. Those don't require any type of assessment. They're just double the value, or 4 or 5 times the value of what you stole. How come we don't do those chiyuvim nowadays? Navish lichusayu. Based on your logic that if it doesn't need assessment, we could make such piskei halacha today. So why don't we done dine knossos? Why don't we be mechai people kefel and dalvei? So the answer is Amri kikav dinin shlichusayu b'mamana. When do we have this license to be able to blame it, link our psak back to the original batidinim? That's if it's mamana, if I'm being mechai b'mamana. The knasa lo yav dinin shlichusayu. By knas, like kefel and dalvei, there we're never able to work with the license of the president. Frank the Gemara, that still doesn't help me, because adam ba'adam the mamanahu. If a person is damaged by a person, the chiyuv to pay nezek is mammon. It's not knas. So vaytinav it's shlichusayu. So the Gemara now says ki avdina shlichusayu b'milsa d'shchicha. You only link things back. The best. The only time we use this mechanism is only if it's a very common type of thing that occurs, and we can't just ignore it. We have to take action. So for those things, they use this stretch mechanism of blaming it, of linking it back to the original best. It's not that common where a person gets damaged by another person. It's not a common thing. Therefore, lo yavdin in shlichusai. Gemara, I understand it's not common that one person should chop off the hand of another person. But harei boishas, the shchiach, and the Bach takes out the word pagam, boishas is shchiach, because it happens more often that someone's mavaza somebody else. They have a sichsuch, mavaza. It's not that often that someone's going to cut off his friend's hand, but that'll be the vazim and cause a chiyav, trigger a chiyav of boishas is common. So vayter navet shlichusayu, at least legabe boishas, since it's common, why don't we make such piskei halacha today? Amri hachanami, maybe you do. Maybe you actually do collect on boishas nowadays, and I'll prove it to you. The Rav Papa Agbi Arba Meya Zuzi Laboishas. Rav Papa once, and Rav Papa is nowadays, he's in the times of the Amayroim, he actually did make collections of boishas. Frank the Gemara, but Rav Papa is a single shita. Nobody agrees with Rav Papa. But lastly, the Rav Papa. How do I know? The Shalach le Rav Chisda le Rav Nachman. Once upon a time, Rav Chisda sent a shalach to Rav Nachman about how should I assess the value of this boishas. And you know what Rav Nachman answered? V'shalach le Chisda, what is the matter with you? Knaser kamagvis bavavel. You ask me how much? You shouldn't be paskening on any question of a knas of boishas. And here it's not literally a knas. The reason why Rashi says it's referred to as a knas is because there's no actual damage. It's just a feeling. There's no loss of money. Ella, we're back to the drawing board. Why is it that we do make judgments if an animal gets damaged, yet we don't make judgments if a person gets damaged? The Torah says you need 2 features, you need 2 mitigating factors to allow this interesting mechanism that shlichusayu kavdina. Al-kihi avdina shlichusayu, you need 2 things. A, you need milsa the shchicha, and you need milsa the isbei chisarinkis. You need both. Aval milsa the shchicha v'les bechazar kiss like boishes. Inami milsa la shchicha, which is actual damage to a person. But the is bechazar kiss. There's a chazar kiss, but it's an uncommon thing. There lo yavdin shluchasai. So how do the chips fall? Hilchach. Adam ba'adam afagav the ein bechazar kiss. By Adam ba'adam, I'm sorry, afagav the is bechazar kiss. Even though a person literally loses if his values drop because he loses a hand. But given the shchicha, since it's not a common occurrence, we don't allow Batadidim today to deal with this and say we're under the supervision of the previous Emes Musmach. But Boishes, Afalgav the shchicha, Boishes is common. Maybe Besson will want to engage here. Given the less Chasar case, since at the end of the day there's no loss of money here, once again, Lo Yavdin Shluchusayu. But Vishar Bishar, Goivin Bava. Shar Bishar is different because it's common and it's damage. But frankly, Gemara, how could you say that Rava allows an Amar Aleph? Rava said they should go make the assessment of what the damage was. But Rava himself said, "The Amar Rava Shar Shehizik ain't going to say Bava." So it's a stira. Here Rava says when the donkey chewed off this child's hand, Rava was mechayiv. Rava says when the shar damages, we don't make such collection in Bavel. Zaktamar, let's drill down here. The Azik man, who did the shar damage when Rava said ain't going to say Bava? Adam, if it was a person that got damaged, my ear Yashar Dazik Adam, Afilu Adam the Azik Adam, Nami ain't going to Baba. We just learned that even if it's an Adam who did damage, where there's a greater reason to be Mechayivim, he did something wrong, even there you don't want because it's missing the fact that it's not common. Alapshita, Rava's halacha, the chiddush must be the azik shar. It's a shar azik shar, and still the katani ain goyvin oisay b'bavel. So we have a stira. How come Rav over here was willing to collect damages for the child's hand that got bitten up? So Gemara Amri Hasam b'tam hacha b'muad. By a shar tam that damages, there Rava didn't want to collect. By a shar mood, Rava would collect. Frank Gemara, what do you mean? V'yamar Rava ain mood b'bavel. Rava said there's no such thing as a mood b'bavel. So how could you say over here there's a mood? You can't have a mood. You know why you can't have a mood? Because how you can have a mood? You have to have 3 sets of Adim that came along and said it's twice 3 times. You don't have the bezin to accept Adim. So it's impossible to have a mood. Amri, no, the case was the Ayat Hosam. We're talking about an animal that became a mood in Eretz Yisrael, where there was a Sanhedrin, by Sui Lahacha, and now the animal moved here. Frank the Gemara, your whole comment was if it's something that's unusual, we don't make such collections in Bavel, it's an unusual thing that an animal that was a mood now got transported to Bavel. Come on. You don't use that principle when it's an unusual and uncommon thing. So maybe that's not what happened. Maybe Dayanim that were Mumchin, that were Musmachim, moved from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and they were the ones who officiated. That's the same thing. That's also not common that Chachmei Eretz Yisrael are going to move to Bavel. And spinning your words right back to yourself. So under what conditions did Rava say that you could collect on Amad Aleph if we see Rava says you're not Toiveya from Nizkei Shar? Ella Kikama Rava b'Shein V'Regel. On Amad Aleph, what was it? It was a Shar who ate. That's Shein V'Regel. The Mu'adin Mitchilasan in it. The Mu'adin Mitchilasan. So there it's a Mu'ad. That's where Rava said you'll collect. But if it's in this case Shar, you would not collect. Gavaltic. Okay, we're running a little bit late, so we'll stop here and we'll be Mamshech tomorrow. Shkoyach. Everyone should have a wonderful day and a happy Tu B'Shvat.